You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 1st of July 2026 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Hello, this is The Globalist, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin.
And live from Paris, I'm Alexandre Kouchner. Coming up on today's show.
The time has come. It is my duty to accompany my people. We need to be together.
Exiled Venezuelan opposition leader María Corina Machado says she's being prevented from returning home. We'll get the latest from the beleaguered country, where the double earthquake is presenting a worsening political and humanitarian crisis.
Investigations are underway after a parcel bomb exploded in Monaco on Monday. We'll recap what we know so far and discuss whether this marks a new phase in the war in Ukraine spreading to Western Europe.
We'll have a rustle through the papers from our Zurich studio before heading to Tokyo to look at the state of the yen. Then,
British people now tend to fold in the American Revolution as something that they're quite sympathetic to, even though actually the relationship was, of course, very badly severed at that time, violently severed.
Our series ahead of 250 years of US independence looks at the special US-UK relationship over the centuries. And we'll have a roundup of cultural events not to miss in Europe before turning to a very important topic this time of year.
That's right. We'll find out what makes the perfect summer playlist. That's all ahead here on The Globalist, live from London and Paris. First, a look at what else is happening in the news. Iran has refused direct talks with US envoys in Qatar, raising fresh doubts over the ceasefire and the Strait of Hormuz. Ukraine's attacks on Russian oil sites have pushed parts of Russia into a worsening fuel crisis, and the US Supreme Court has blocked Trump's attempt to restrict birthright citizenship. Do stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on those stories. Now, we begin in Venezuela, where the aftermath of last week's twin earthquakes is becoming a political crisis as well as a humanitarian one. More than 1,700 people are reported dead, hospitals are under severe strain, and anger is growing over the pace of rescue efforts. Meanwhile, opposition leader María Corina Machado says she's trying to return from Panama to help with the recovery, accusing the government of blocking her. Well, for the latest, I'm joined now by Antonio Sampaio, who's an expert on Latin American politics and security. Antonio, many thanks for coming into the studio. Can you update us with the news from the worst hit areas?
Yes, so the worst hit state is called La Guaira, where most of the damage has been documented. The numbers vary greatly in terms of buildings collapsed and damaged. So the government says that in total there were something like 800 buildings damaged and 100 and close to 200 collapsed. But a new study by NASA, new mapping by NASA of the worst hit areas point to potentially over 50,000 buildings damaged. I'm not sure how that calculation is made, but that adds up to the pressure, the political pressure that you mentioned, because it is inevitably connected to the institutional sort of collapse of Venezuela. That is, the infiltration of top positions that should be technical, institutions that should be technical and, responsible for public services, etc., that have been instead staffed by appointees and allies of the socialist sort of Chavista government that has been, ruling Venezuela for the past 27 years. The political situation, the sort of institutional fragility greatly exacerbated the damage.
So, in fact, what you're saying is, the infrastructure is just not there. It couldn't have, the recovery effort would not have been more swift because of this damage, but also because of the human exit from there, the lack of skilled workers.
Yes, there are two aspects to the response that, were exacerbated by the institutional fragility. One is the aspect of the buildings that I just mentioned, because part of the reason why many experts and journalists in Venezuela suspect that so many buildings were damaged or collapsed is that just building regulations were not followed. There was a lot of, corruption and poor sort of building standards, and also the economic crisis meant that many buildings were not retrofitted after legislation was passed to prevent disasters in a very earthquake-prone country. And the other aspect is public services that were also, badly fared during the past few decades of the regime, but also the huge exodus from Venezuela, the brain drain, in which it is estimated that a quarter of the Venezuelan population migrated to other countries in South America and in Central America, especially. So doctors, nurses, emergency responders were among those that migrated. And, the institutional knowledge, the expertise, even though there are still, of course, doctors and nurses in Venezuela, those provisions were those key positions were weakened. And on top of that, there is the simple issue that Venezuela already faced quite a lot of scarcities, infrastructure fragilities. So, for instance, water and food security were already quite problematic. And in fact, many United Nations reports on human rights in Venezuela and the situation there already pointed to that before the earthquake. So the institutional and infrastructure capacities of Venezuela were already extremely weak prior to this.
And there are reports that the army is actually actively hindering rescue efforts.
Yes, there are some reports of that. There are the army has been trained and equipped to protect the regime, to suppress freedom of expression, and, in a very authoritarian regime in which their authoritarian sort of tendencies were let loose, I think that there are reports that they have, stopped people from accessing certain areas unnecessarily, and it is not known yet how that is playing out, because there's so much happening at the same time. But the government, unlike previous disasters, the government has allowed international aid. So there were some previous disasters during the Chavista years when Venezuela refused, especially U.S. aid. So now it seems that there has been a massive influx of aid, supplies, and also emergency equipment and teams from other countries, including the U.S. So that has, I think, made up in recent days for the slow response of the Venezuelan government. But the population is extremely angry that at the initial stages, when more lives could have been saved, that the government has been very slow and unprepared to do that.
What's the situation surrounding the return of the opposition leader, María Machado?
Yeah, so María Corina Machado has had a surprisingly problematic relationship with the U.S. government in recent months. She is the leader, the foremost figure of the opposition that many believe, many international, observers and experts believe won the last presidential election in Venezuela that was, controlled by the current leftist government. So she is now prevented from entering Venezuela and told by the U.S. government that, they want to stay with the current interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, who is a lifelong, Chavista ally of Nicolás Maduro, who is in prison in the U.S. So it's surprising that the U.S. is retaining sort of the Chavista regime, and she wants to return, and she said publicly that she wanted to return for a long time, but also especially after the earthquake, to sort of help the Venezuelan people, follow things closely. But the Venezuelan government, still refuses to allow that, and it seems that the U.S. to maintain the sort of practical, especially oil money flowing, wants to leave the situation as it is. So she's now stranded, more or less.
And just briefly, could this possibly be her moment? Has the crisis seriously dented Delcy Rodriguez, and could there be civil unrest?
I think there could be. The short answer is there could be. But as I said, the recent influx of emergency teams has, really struck the emergency of responding to the disaster now. But I think the situation, a lot of people are living in tents, and there could be a lot of social discontent, especially with the lack of transparency of where the oil money in Venezuela is going. I think there will be those questions. Where's the money to support? Is it going to Trump? Is it going to the US? And that could be very destabilizing for her.
Antonio, thank you very much indeed. That's Antonio Sampao, who's an expert on Latin American politics and security. And this is The Globalist.
It's 8:11 here in Paris and 7:11 in London, and we now turn to Monaco, where a parcel bomb exploded shortly before 9 p.m. on Monday night. The attack seriously wounded 2 people and left a teenager with lighter injuries. Authorities did not confirm the identity of the targeted person, but several media outlets reported that Ukrainian-born oligarch Vladimir Moloyev was severely injured. So could this unprecedented attack that rocked the usually super safe principality be an extension of the war in Ukraine? For some needed analysis, I'm joined by Romain de Calbiac, security consultant and affiliate of Sciences Po in Paris. Romain, thank you very much for being with us this morning. On Monday, Monaco's Minister of State said that the intelligence services were working to understand the victim's background, and it now seems that this victim is Vladimir Moloyev. Who is he exactly? Why would he be targeted?
Good morning, Alexander. Thanks for having me this morning. Yes, there are a few elements that are starting to emerge regarding the main victim, because as you rightfully noted, there are 3 of them, but all belonging to the same family. They're all members of the Yamolev family. Quite significant name in Ukraine. Is definitely affiliated with one particular individual who was wounded in the explosion, Mr. Vadim Yamolev himself. We know he's a real estate developer from Dnipro in Ukraine. We know also that he is identified as an oligarch. The Ukrainian government has issued a list identifying up to 84 of such individuals. So he's one of those 84 individuals identified as oligarch by the Ukrainian government. We know he's been acting also on both sides of the border of Russian annexed Crimea, notably engaging in alcohol trade, illegal smuggling with Crimea. And we know also that he's sought refuge in Cyprus, where he's actually managed to claim citizenship back in 2019. So he's definitely a fairly prominent, fairly colorful also figure from Ukraine, very much the embodiment of a certain category of Ukrainian oligarch who have tried to flee the conflict in Ukraine and continue operating from abroad.
You just mentioned some illegal activities, and the attack is now being investigated as attempted murder, but it's still unclear whether this is crime-related or if it's an intelligence operation. Do we know which direction the investigation is taking?
Yes, you're absolutely right of pointing out those 2 main options, because that they both stand out as genuine and decent possibilities here. Having said that, from unofficial, let's say, sources within the French security apparatus, France and Monaco have strong security ties, as you may know. At the moment, the preferred option, the preferred investigation course is that of work carried out by the Ukrainian secret services in general, and the SBU service more specifically. It's a service that very much reports back to the internal security agency of the Ukrainian government, with a history of tracking down opponents to Ukraine. So at the moment, although it's not official indeed, authorities are treating that as an act of very likely the work of indeed Ukraine security services.
It's not the first time Ukrainian security services have operated beyond the borders. Of course, the Nord Stream pipeline sabotage in 2022 showed that the Ukrainian elements could carry out operations on Allied territories. Do we know of any other such cases of Ukraine covered operations on Allied soil?
Yes, as a matter of fact, or rather we suspect them because until today, until the attack in Monaco, which is indeed quite brutal and highly visible, so pretty much the exact opposite of what covert and secret operations should be about. There were cases where indeed targets were struck in mainland Russia, notably around St. Petersburg, where it's quite clear that the attacks carried out using actually both naval and airborne drones were probably launched with some complicity from Allied territory in Europe, be it in Estonia or in Finland, or probably even beyond that in the wider Baltic, Nordic region. There have also been cases of tankers belonging to the so-called Russian Phantom Fleet being targeted off the coast of Italy, between Italy, Libya, and Greece in south and southeastern Mediterranean. So we know very much, it's actually very much accepted that Ukrainian secret operatives actually are active in Europe and operate from there. Again, usually for attacking targets based outside of Europe. So Europe is mostly used as an operating base rather than an area where to strike. But it could be that indeed the attack in Monaco is one first such instance of Ukraine using Europe also as a targeting spot.
And briefly, my last question is, should this bomb attack be a Ukrainian op, what could it be its impact on French-Ukrainian cooperation? After all, President Zelensky keeps telling how critical European support is for Ukraine. Could this operation alter that support?
Well, it certainly is a fairly clumsy operation in the sense that, again, it was highly visible, excessively brutal. So not the sort of secret op you would like to have your own secret services to perform. Having said that, is it going to impact the wider Ukraine, Europe, and France, more specifically, relationship? The answer is probably no, in very blunt terms, because what is at stake here goes far beyond that mere attack, goes far beyond Mr. Yamolayev's case. It is an embarrassment. It's going to be a temporary embarrassment for the bilateral relationship, but in the short to medium term, I sincerely believe that it will be forgotten, and they will be back to business as usual, simply because Europe cannot avoid abandoning, cannot afford to abandon Ukraine. And support needs to be continuous and prolonged. So again, mostly a nuisance, but certainly not a deal breaker between Europe and Ukraine.
Romain de Calbiac, security consultant and affiliate of Sciences Po in Paris, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Still to come in the program. And I am now dancing alone in the studio because a new playlist from Monocle is out. We'll speak to our musical curator Fernando Augusto Pacheco about what makes the perfect summer playlist. This is The Globalist.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, and obsessive attention to detail. With UBS's Chief Investment Office Houseview, we're focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals, so you get the big picture broken down into thought-provoking insights. Delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts. UBS. Banking is our craft.
This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. I'm Georgina Godwin, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. Let's continue now with today's newspapers, and joining me in Zurich is Noelle Salmi. She's an author and journalist who's written for USA Today and Emerging Markets. Noelle, good morning to you.
Good morning, Georgina.
Very busy week for the US Supreme Court. Lots of decisions have come down and sort of with mixed results. Some very good news for Donald Trump and others not so much. Tell me what's been going on.
Yeah, that's right. So Georgina, as you probably know, on Monday, the court overturned decades of precedent by ruling that Trump, or any future president, one would think, has the right to fire heads of independent regulatory agencies, such as the Federal Trade Commission. The only exception would be the Federal Reserve. And this is pretty significant. And then yesterday, the court had several rulings. The first one was a blow to Trump in his efforts to overturn so-called birthright citizenship. In a 6-3 ruling, the court said that children born on U.S. soil are citizens at birth, regardless of their parents' immigration status. On day one of his second term, Trump had signed an executive order aimed at denying citizenship to babies born to undocumented immigrants and to parents who were here on temporary visas like students or workers. The lower courts had blocked it, and they'd called it unconstitutional and had never, the order had never taken effect. But now it is away for a while. Republicans have said that they want to now try to push it forward in the legislatively, but that is probably not going to happen. Another win for Republicans was that transgender athletes will no longer be able to play on girls' sports in public schools or universities if the states ban that. Should we talk a little bit about the Supreme Court birthright citizenship?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that's really dramatic about it is that 4 of the justices actually voted to uphold Trump's executive order. And that's really remarkable because this is written in the Constitution. It's been in the Constitution since 1989. And it really shows, according to a lot of observers, that these guys are not really following their judicial jurisprudence, if you will, but really following their conservative Trump ideology. And then lastly, and this is really disturbing, was the effort to limit campaign financing. It has again been eased by the conservative members of the court. And so now what that means is that Republicans, campaign finances can all be joined together. There are no limits on whether candidates or super PACs or Democrat parties on how they coordinate together, which means that Republicans that traditionally get their funding from super PACs and the party structure can now compete more effectively against Democrats who tend to get their funding directly as candidates who are charged lower television fees. It's a little bit complex, but what it means is that once again, more money is going to flood the political system in the U.S.
Which is never a good thing. Noah, let's move on to Iran. As we've been hearing in our headlines, the talks don't seem to be happening. And both Iran and Oman have said that they are planning fees for use of the Strait of Hormuz when the war is over. And of course, that would be against international law. Tell me more about this.
Yes. Well, the New York Times is citing conversations with Iranian officials and diplomats who said exactly that the two countries are moving forward with plans to collect those fees. As you know, it would be a major change from the pre-war status when the Strait of Hormuz was an international shipping route that vessels sailed through freely, carrying oil and gas from the Persian Gulf to the rest of the world. Oman recently delivered a formal proposal to the United States and other allies outlining a plan in which shipping companies would pay service fees, but they would be voluntary fees rather than a mandatory toll. Oman's proposal is partly modeled on arrangements in the Straits of Malacca, in Singapore, an Asian waterway where private Japanese foundation collects voluntary contributions for safe navigation. Iran, on the other hand, says that the payments would be obligatory. It's a really tough spot for Oman, which has been trying to serve as a mediator between the United States and Iran and trying to have a more neutral stance, but it is in a tough spot. In fact, recently, the International Maritime Organization designated a safe route that passed only through Oman territorial waters, and Iran responded by attacking a cargo ship in the strait. And that ended up halting efforts to evacuate hundreds of stranded ships in the waterway. So this is going to be a tough issue, and Iran has no intention of letting go of this crucial leverage that it has discovered since the war began.
And Donald Trump has in fact threatened to bomb Oman if it charges fees. I mean, you'd think he'd really need the country, which is trying to broker the peace.
Yeah, exactly. He said he would bomb Iran if it didn't behave itself just like everybody else.
Oman, not Iran. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Good. Yes. Oman. Thank you.
Right. Let's go on to a feel-good story. So this is from the Canadian Globe and Mail, and it's about an eagle.
Yes, this really is a lovely story that the Globe and Mail picked up from an Associated Press reporter in Serbia about a 1-year-old endangered imperial eagle that had set off from Serbia on its migration to the Middle East, where it was captured by poachers, sold illegally, and then returned. So this imperial eagles were seriously endangered and down to one breeding pair. In 2017, this protected species was recovered thanks to a lot of work by Serbia's Bird Protection and Study Society. And then finally, a 1-year-old Felix was ringed with a transmitter and set off. And he went across North Macedonia, Greece, and Turkey, and then his signal was lost in Syria. Fortunately, the Serbian Bird Protection Society discovered that he had been captured and sold, and they made great efforts to bring him back. He was brought back in a potato sack into Lebanon by a group of refugees, and then Serbian troops serving in a UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon brought Felix home in a transport military plane. He's now at the zoo. He's going to be quarantined for a few days, and then he will be let go again. And hopefully he's not too bored, said the zookeepers.
Noelle, thank you very much indeed. That's Noelle Salmi speaking to us from our Zurich studio. You're with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Now, here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. Iran says it will only deal with the US through mediators, even though US envoys are now in Qatar for talks. The standoff has put fresh pressure on efforts to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, keeping oil markets on edge and the wider ceasefire under strain. Ukrainian strikes on Russian oil infrastructure have helped drive fuel shortages, long queues and rising prices at Russian filling stations. It's one of the clearest signs yet that Ukraine can disrupt Russia's economy as well as its military operations. And the US Supreme Court has blocked Donald Trump's attempt to deny automatic citizenship to some children born in America. His order told US agencies not to recognize US-born children as citizens unless at least one parent was an American citizen or a legal permanent resident. But the ruling keeps birthright citizenship in place. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Just coming up to 15.29 in Tokyo, that's 8.29 in Zurich. The Japanese yen has fallen past 162 to the dollar, marking its weakest point in about 40 years. While the weak yen is a boost for foreign tourists, it's also pushing up import prices and living costs in Japan. Tokyo's already spent more than $70 billion this year trying to support the currency, and markets are now watching for another possible intervention. So I'm joined now by Jason Douglas, who is the Tokyo Bureau Chief of the Wall Street Journal. Jason, many thanks for joining us. Why has the yen fallen to this 40-year low?
Good morning, Georgina. So there's a bunch of reasons. One of them is interest rates. So there's a big gap between interest rates in Japan and interest rates elsewhere in the world, especially the US. Another is there's a bit of anxiety over the fiscal plans of Prime Minister Takaichi, who wants to spend more money, try and get Japan's economy motoring again. Another is the strength of the dollar, which has been rising pretty strongly this year. And then the last I'd mention is maybe outflows. So we're getting, Japanese investors are pouring money into AI. Foreign investors who are pumping money into Japanese stock markets tend to hedge their exposure, so they're selling yen. So what you get is this kind of toxic mix, and it has been driving the yen lower for quite some time now.
And how is the weak yen changing everyday life in Japan?
Well, it's certainly contributing to inflation. Japan imports a lot, as you mentioned. They import a lot of energy in particular. And so the government has taken steps to, through subsidies to cap people's fuel bills and gasoline bills. But you're certainly seeing it on prices. And Japan, let's not forget, is a country that is only really emerging from 30 years of deflation, of falling prices. So any sign of deflation doesn't really go down too well. The flip side, as you mentioned, is Japan is getting a lot of tourists, and many people are drawn here by the prospect that their money will go much further here than it will back home.
Yeah, and aside from the tourists, who else benefits from a weaker yen?
The other big beneficiary are Japanese companies, right? So big companies like Toyota, Honda, Nissan, all these big manufacturers, they sell a lot of cars overseas, they repatriate those profits, and when they're converted into yen, they get a big boost. So exporters are the main ones that benefit.
Mm-hmm. How much pressure is the government under to step in?
I think they're certainly under pressure. What they don't want the yen to slide uncontrollably. As we mentioned, Japan imports a lot, with energy prices having come down a little bit since the Strait of Hormuz reopened. There isn't quite so much pressure from energy there, but what they were doing when they were intervening earlier in the year was trying to cap the price of energy in yen effectively, or at least that was one of the results of their policy. It does seem pretty likely that they're going to intervene again pretty soon. The yen, as you mentioned, is slid to a 40-year low. Inflation is creeping up in Japan. They don't want it to go much higher. The Prime Minister has a very close eye on living standards and is keen to make sure that she tackles something which has been a problem for her last couple of predecessors. So it seems pretty likely that intervention could come pretty soon. Traders in the foreign exchange market are looking at Friday. So there's a public holiday in the United States, of course, for July the 4th. And what that means is there's a lot less liquidity, there's a lot less trading in the market, so you get a bit more bang for your buck if you intervene on days like that.
And do you think that the weak yen is becoming a long-term challenge for Japan?
Well, I think it is a long-term challenge already. I mean, I was looking at some charts today. The yen has kind of been on a downward trajectory since about 2010, 2011, and with very few, sort of reversals during that period. I think Japan is still way behind everyone else in raising interest rates. The economy is sort of normalizing. The Bank of Japan is raising rates, but it's doing so just at a much more slow pace than other countries. Rates are much lower. And until Japan starts to look a bit more like a normal country again, if that's not an unpleasant way of putting it, then I think this yen weakness probably will persist.
Do you think that this could become politically dangerous for the government?
I do. I mean, inflation is politically toxic no matter where it happens. And in Japan, as we were talking about, people aren't really used to inflation, and it does kind of make people angry and upset when they start seeing the prices of things that they've been used to falling, for the past 30 years start to go up. So I think it is politically dangerous. Nonetheless, Takaichi is still very popular, and provided things don't get too out of control, this is an issue that shouldn't necessarily haunt her, but it's certainly been very problematic for some of her predecessors.
And finally, Jason, does Japan have the tools to stop this slide, or is it mostly at the mercy of the US dollar?
It depends really what your objective is. I don't think the right way to think about it is that they're trying to stop the slide, that they're trying to reverse course, if you like. I think what they're trying to do is just not prevent it getting too weak, if that makes sense. They want to put a floor under the yen. And they do have the tools to do that. They have huge foreign exchange reserves. They're nowhere near getting, even close to finishing those. They can intervene a lot. But as we were talking about, until the interest rate picture really starts to change, then it probably will be something they'll have to keep a very close eye on.
Jason, thank you very much indeed. That's Jason Douglas there speaking to us from Tokyo. And this is Monocle Radio.
Saturday marks 250 years since the United States declared independence, and since then, the US has grown into the world's foremost superpower. Monocle's series All This Week on the Globalist has been asking where America got its power from and how quickly it could lose it again. Today, we look at the relationship between the United States and its erstwhile colonial power, the United Kingdom to explore the rise and fall of an empire. Here's the historian Alex von Tunzelmann, starting in the year 1776.
If we look back to 1776, there's part of Britain that very much was, let's squash these people immediately. But there were also some concerns about, exactly what was going on, how easy this was going to be. I mean, this kind of colonial war of resistance was in a way something quite new, although there had, of course, been resistance to Britain in India and other places before. It's kind of the first really massive rebellion against power coming from London. So there was a great deal of concern about it, but I think also there was a lot of arrogance. A lot of Brits thought that this would be beaten quite quickly, and of course it was not. I think by the time of 1812, there's a lot of confusion in Britain about how to view the Americans. That obviously there's still a level of hostility, a sort of disbelief that these people have managed to break away and start their own republic. Britain is still riding pretty high, of course, in European terms and in international terms, and still has a tremendous empire. In fact, the empire is growing at this point in many ways. They're also in Europe fighting Napoleon. There's many other threats that are looming larger, I think, in their imagination than the Americans, who are geographically very far away. And that, of course, is quite significant at this stage, when you're still talking about very slow travel times by ship. You're talking about big cultural differences and distances that can't easily be traversed. And so, there's not necessarily a huge impact of whatever is happening in America on the British imagination at this point. I think they're still much more focused really on Europe. Britons in the late 19th century were very much suffused with a sense of their own greatness and not necessarily hugely focused on whether, if you were to look at the actual statistics, the United States was doing better. By that point in the late 19th century, you're talking about an enormous British empire. India has become part of it formally. It's an absolutely massive geographical area. It's growing in Africa by that point. Also, by that late 19th century point, Britain has abolished slavery in its own dominions, has felt quite superior about that over the United States, which has, of course, taken longer to do so. But then, by the late 19th century, they're seeing the emergence of this very economically strong US. That's sort of a period where really there's a real reconciliation in terms of Britain deciding that actually America is, potentially a country that it wants to be very much allied with, that is sort of part of its story. That even though theoretically this was, 13 colonies that broke away and did their own thing, there starts to be a definition of, white colonies, English-speaking peoples, which are supposedly having a kind of natural sympathy with each other in a way that people in the empire who are not white and don't necessarily speak English as a first language are not being included in that way. I think World War II is a really significant moment because although Britain is incredibly powerful and it is this huge empire and are pulling in soldiers and manpower and all this stuff from across a tremendous swathe of the world, you have a sort of duality in the British imagination where at one level it's an isolated nation standing alone against the threat of fascism and Nazism internationally. At the same time, it's also the head of a massive global empire and a massive superpower. And it is, at this time in history, they talk about three superpowers. The Soviet Union, the US, and Britain are all talked about as superpowers in the 1940s and 50s. And I think really what changes there is that you do see, because even with what is going on in World War II, even with everything Britain is able to muster, the direction of travel is not great in kind of 1941 or so. And really, You would almost think if Pearl Harbor hadn't happened, and I'm not suggesting anything, that Britain would have planned it because they needed something to pull America into the war. There was a sense that this is what we need, is for the US to come in because we can't actually win this alone. After the war, there's a process of decolonisation, and in places like India, for instance, you find that Americans generally very much supported Indian independence, pitched for that. That annoyed the British quite a lot, but naturally it was the case that Americans felt a sort of automatic sympathy for colonial nations rising up to throw off the British yoke. I mean, one can see why. Historically, this, of course, rhymed a little for them. And the British are quite annoyed by that, while at the same time sort of wanting to keep the US sweet. So there was, kind of a difficult relationship around them. But of course, the big point in 1956 was the Suez Crisis, when Britain and France colluded with Israel to basically stage a false invasion of Egypt so that they could invade as peacekeepers and seize the Suez Canal. And the crucial point around Suez was that Eisenhower and the US intervened and pretty much made Britain stop. And that was a really signal point, because that was the point at which you could see that relationship had switched. That perhaps, there were elements of it, of course, already there, but at that point it became very clear that actually Britain could not operate in a way that the Americans just fully opposed. It had to climb down. It wasn't possible. And that was partially to do with oil. That was a massive factor, that if oil stopped coming from the Middle East, say through a narrow strait, you may notice some sort of modern echoes of this going on, then it had to come from the West, and oil from the West could be priced in dollars, which would, of course, affect British dollar stocks and dollar reserves. They would need credits from the World Bank and so forth to buy that, which Eisenhower told the World Bank not to give until they stopped fighting. Dennis Healey actually said at the time, he was a Labour MP, that the only effective use of sanctions in history was the Americans against the British over Suez. And so the fact that this could be done was because American power was by then so much greater than British power. Looking back on all this relationship after 250 years of American independence, the loss of the American colonies was a really major downer for Britain, which is a fascinating thing now to think about, because effectively, I think if you ask 20 British people in the street what happened at the Battle of Yorktown, I imagine you will get 20 blank stares, unless somebody has seen Hamilton. They may then know something about what happened there, but this is not something that's taught in schools in Britain. This is not something that is part of our story, because in a sense, British people now tend to fold in the American Revolution as something that they're quite sympathetic to and that seemed like a reasonable part of a relationship, even though actually the relationship was, of course, very badly severed at that time, violently severed. And then what follows, of course, in the early 19th century is more war and more, and it wasn't immediately solved and smoothed over. But in the fullness of time, Britain came to view America as such an important ally that actually, in a way, that was just part of the story that became sort of accepted and glossed over.
That was the historian Alex von Tunzelmann. Our series ahead of Saturday's 250th anniversary since the Declaration of Independence continues tomorrow. This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Football fans around the world have their eyes set on the World Cup, but that's not the only show you could enjoy these days. For the latest and most interesting cultural events around Europe, I'm joined now by Julia Webster Ayuso, a British-Spanish journalist in Paris and regular Monocle contributor. Good morning. Thanks for being with us. Julia, you recently went to Barcelona for Monocle's Quality of Life survey, and it seems that Las Ramblas is getting some sort of a redevelopment. Less pilot picks and more actual space to breathe and live in. Tell us more about that.
Yes, so Barcelona, which is my hometown, I'm very proud it came 13th in the Monocle Quality of Life Survey this year. And a part of it is the city's attempts to improve the city for locals in various ways with several redevelopment projects. Barcelona's struggles with over-tourism are well documented. I recently just got back from the city where I interviewed the Councillor for Sustainable Tourism, who says the city has reached a maximum amount of visitors. And so one of the redevelopment projects that the city has undertaken is the redevelopment of La Rambla, which is this, if you've been to Barcelona, you'll know it. It's this very famous street, long promenade, and it's become synonymous with over-tourism in the city. And it is a street that locals avoid because it's become so overcrowded. So this redevelopment attempts to bring locals back through several things that they're doing. So they're redesigning the street in several ways. They've introduced a new design code for the terraces and restaurants. So terraces have specific design elements they need to stick to. They can't include any pictures of paella, and they're trying to essentially make it a place that locals can enjoy.
These weren't exactly great pictures either. We're now turning to another item that you picked up, which has less to do with pictures and more with text, because it seems that AI is now helping archaeologists decipher ancient scripts.
Yes, this is a really interesting story of the power of AI to help archaeologists decipher ancient texts. So there's a project called the Vesuvius Challenge, and basically researchers are trying to decipher these papyrus scrolls that were burnt and carbonized when Mount Vesuvius erupted almost 2,000 years ago in the Sirte of Herculaneum. And with the help of AI and artificial intelligence, they've been able to unroll these papyrus scrolls and partly decipher the texts in them. There are hundreds of these scrolls that have been preserved under mud and ash for millennia, and they're in this luxurious villa that is the largest library known to have survived from classical antiquity. Over the years, scholars have tried several times to unroll these papyruses and read them, but they've only been able to do this recently thanks to AI. So the way that it works is there's a CAT scan of the papyrus rolls, which allows them to be unrolled virtually, and then the text has been deciphered by archaeologists. So one of these papyruses has been found to talk about Stoic thought, and so it's a huge historical breakthrough, and researchers will be studying these texts now for the years to come.
That does sound very promising indeed, if you're able to read without destroying the documents and finally making sense of them. Now, last item, and that's a very important item for us here in Paris. We just survived one heat wave. A second one might be coming, or maybe it's the third. I sort of lost count there in the heat. But the Seine is reopening for swimming in Paris, and that's about to happen soon.
Yes, so after the opening of the Canal Saint-Martin, the sort of emergency reopening of this canal for swimming, Paris is now getting ready for a second year of swimming in the Seine. The Seine will be opening on the 4th of July, so the Canal Saint-Martin will close and swimmers will have to move to the Seine, to these 3 spots that have been designed to welcome swimmers throughout the summer. There's one in Bercy, there's one in Pont-Marie near Notre Dame, and there's one near the Eiffel Tower. So the Seine opened for swimmers last summer for the first time after the city poured more than €1 billion into efforts to clean up the waters. And some 100,000 people jumped in last year. Of course, this year it's been incredible to see so many people jumping into the canal even before all of the Seine reopened, because we've gone through this brutal heat wave that sent temperatures up to 40 degrees in some places, forced schools to close and overwhelmed the healthcare system. So the Canal Saint-Martin turned into this massive public swimming pool. And now the authorities are getting ready to move everyone to the Seine.
So when this development happened and there was a lot of money poured into making the Seine swimmable, of course many people sort of shrugged it off, saying we'll never go in there, it's dirty. So what you're telling us is that this is a massive success, and it turns out Parisians actually like to go swimming in the Seine.
Yeah, I think last year there were sort of two teams, the Parisians who were happy to jump in and the Parisians who were definitely very skeptical of the situation. But personally, I did swim in the Seine last year, and I thought, that the town hall did a lot to reassure people. They tested the water every day. There are plenty of lifeguards there to watch everyone and to answer questions. So yes, I think it has been a success, and with the heat wave, it's become clear that this is something that Paris needs to do.
Julia Webster, a USO journalist and Monocle contributor in Paris, who swam in the Seine and survived to tell the tale. Thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
So after swimming, earthquakes, explosions and the general crumbling of civilization, we're doing something essential now. Choosing the perfect summer playlist. Monocle's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, has put together 40 scorching songs for Monocle, from Brazilian disco to K-pop, Eurovision schmaltz and, of course, his beloved Madonna. Fernando, what makes a summer song?
So good to be here. Well, you know what? For me, a summer song brings a sense of breeziness to it, a sense of optimism. It will give you a smile in your face. And at least for my summer playlist, they have to be a little bit sexy as well. That's the season where you have to drink, you have to meet people. I think it's my favorite season of the year as well. So, of course, he has the best songs too.
And tell me, what then would you describe as a cool clip?
Well, we'll play 3 tracks today. I think when I say cool, I think this is the track that, for me, it's pure summer. I mean, you don't need to know much about the artist or about the song, but when you hear the beat, when you hear the crystalline voice of our next artist, you will know that that's the season for it. He's a great guy. I've interviewed him, I believe, 2 to 3 years ago. He was a gentleman in the studio. He's from South Africa. His name is Bongazil Mablandla, and the song is called Walila. Shall we have a listen?
Walila, 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 walila.
Well, that does certainly bring a smile to my face. There, you said it, there has to be a sense of carelessness in a summer playlist. But let's be honest, choosing a song for others always tells a bit about the one making that choice. I think that's sort of the second secret, right? Fernando, what's your personal choice for that playlist?
You're so right, because if it doesn't have the personal touch, then you just go to Spotify and ask the algorithms to do the job. But if you know me very well, you know that there needs to be Madonna on the playlist. She's very cool at the moment, but even when she's not cool, I always put Madonna on my playlist. It's almost like a sense of identity. It's like my little stamp on a playlist. But to be honest, Alexander, this is the week for it. She's releasing a new album on Friday. I'm going to her album launch party tomorrow. So I'm super excited. And so far from the songs that are out, this is my favorite. It's a sense of abandon on a dance floor. This is Madonna, I Feel So Free, remixed by Peggy Gou. She feels so free, and so do I, actually.
Well, you're going to a Madonna launching ceremony. I assume you'd feel absolutely great. So a good playlist needs charm, it needs personality. A touch of Peggy Gou is always also a good idea. Georgina, what would be your sort of third ingredient?
Well, I think, Fernando, I think you'd agree to say that the third rule is to be unexpected. Yeah?
I love the element of randomness. You know, I want people to be like, what is that? Or who is actually singing? And I am in my trip-hop era. You know, I've been listening to a lot of music from the 90s. And of course, we know the obvious ones. But one that is not obvious is Naomi Campbell. Yes, I'm talking about the supermodel. She did release some music in the 90s. And this song that we're going to play is from her debut album, Baby Woman. And again, the way I found out about it was very random. I was doing research on trip hop. I found her album on a Soho record store. Very good cover, very fashion. And it's actually quite good. I think it's an underrated jam. So forget about everything she does. I know she's a controversial character. Let's listen. Naomi Campbell, I Want to Live.
I want to live.
I like it very much.
Well, and I mean, it's exactly why human beings are better at making playlists than algorithms, right? I mean, no machine wakes up and says, you know what this summer needs is a bit of Naomi Campbell circa 1994.
That's where my head was going, Georgina.
What makes an unexpected choice work rather than just feel random?
Well, you know, this is very summary. There's also, I think all of those songs here, they have a sense of abandon and a sense that you could listen to them on a dance floor at 3:30 a.m. on a Tuesday evening, for example. Sorry, I know it's a bit random what I'm saying, but it's the truth as well. And you have to, you know how you can find songs? At the back of a cab when you go somewhere abroad. You know, that's my tip. Yeah. Use your Shazam. That's the unexpected.
Do you know what? I was in an Uber a little while ago and the driver said to me, what's your favourite song? And he said he asks everybody in his cab what their favourite song is and then he adds it to his playlist.
What a great idea.
I think that is a fantastic idea for compiling a library of music.
Could be a new podcast as well.
Yeah, it could be a really great idea. Listen, before we go, I understand that you are going to Wimbledon.
That's why I'm all dressed up here in the studio. I'm very excited. My first time there, actually. You know, I'm not a biggest tennis expert, but I do think Wimbledon says so much about England. And I've been living here for so many years that I'm actually very excited. It's quite a big moment.
Who's playing?
Well, everyone. You know, that's the very confusing thing. There's about 18 courts that you can choose. I have tickets for court 1. There will be a Brazilian guy, João Fonseca. That's the one I'm most excited to watch today.
Fernando, thank you very much for joining us. And thanks for, let me find the right sporting metaphor. Thanks for hitting it out the park.
No, Georgina, I'm afraid that's baseball.
Knocking it for 6?
Cricket.
Putting it in the top corner?
Football.
Hitting a hole in one?
That would be golf.
Landing a knockout punch?
Well, that does sound like boxing.
Oh, Fernando, thank you for serving us an ace.
Oh, yes.
And that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much to my co-host Alexander Kushner, who is in Paris, to our producers Angelica Jobson, Chris Chermak, Desiree Bandley and Chloe Nakao-Palata, our researcher Josefina Gomez and our studio manager Steph Chungu, with editing assistance by Hunter Wang. After the headlines, there's more music on the way and The Briefing is live at midday in London. The Globalist will return at the same time tomorrow. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.